really, really value your input. So if at any point in time you feel like making a comment, just do so. This is a conversation starter and should be, really, I think, fruitful back and forth. And it's a good way for all of you guys, for the ones that don't know each other yet, to get to know each other via the comments that you're making. We'll have one quick fireside chat with Peter first, and then we'll have some time to mingle, and then we'll have another one with Mark and Dean from Agoric second. And so I just want to welcome all of you to this beautiful place. Thank you so much for Agoric to hosting us. I don't know how you get any work done. Honestly, it's a really, really fantastic space. And we're very fortunate to be here. So thanks a lot for this. And it's really exciting to see so many of you again in person after the very, very long Zoom drought, I think. And even though we're going to get back into it, and even though it's also a really nice way to connect with all of you on a more regular basis, it is really nice to see so many of you in person. Okay, so I can't say this enough. Just make it fun, chime in if you want to, right? This can be as back and forth as you make it. I can't haggle from the audience because I'm here, but I encourage you to do so.
Heckle your reaction button. There'll be a raised hand.
Yes.
And that'll.
Yeah, you can send me private Zoom messages. I will get back on Wim. Just don't hit everyone by accident. Oh, please do hit everyone, just to make it fun.
Everyone hit yourself before you.
Yes, always. And when breathing loudly, Brad, you're good at this. Yes. And do we have any dogs here?
I didn't bring any dogs.
You didn't bring any dogs, but we'll make do without the dog background noise. So maybe show of hands, who was here in the virtual meeting today? Okay, I guess a few. All right, then everyone else, just as much or even more of an invitation to just, chime right in if you don't get a point or something. There should definitely be something that is approachable to everyone. And so maybe we'll start, really with, a crude notion of AI progress. Take us on a path on the trajectory that we're on. If we develop the systems that, that you are currently building, do you think that we'll head more into a future of perhaps a more centralized agent, a singleton, perhaps that, via economies of scale, creates like one centralized agent with lots of power? Or do you think we'll move more into, a decentralized autonomous market, perhaps where like with many different entities engaging with each other, in a more decentralized way that resembles more our current market economy? So do you think it will become more of a winner-takes-all scenario, or do you think we'll have more of the perhaps Eric Drexler notion of decentralized services that get more and more specialized in an ever-advancing economy? Which path are we on?
Okay. Well, first of all, cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for
cheers, everyone.
Having us all here. That's a great question, and I hear that a lot from like my friends in academia. And I remember years ago, I went to UPenn to give a talk and said, here's all the things we've done, here's the models we built, and Fernando Pereira was a professor there, and he got up and he said, I feel like it's as if we were particle physicists and you're the only ones with a super collider. And so what can we four academics do? And, within a year, he was my roommate at Google and has been at Google ever since. And so I see that a lot from academics who are saying, they just can't compete. I need these resources of data and computing in order to do the things that I want to do. So that certainly suggests this idea of centralization. I do think, however, that, we are seeing this cloud service provider being a growing business, and there's a number of competitors. And right now they're competing on who can give you the cheapest per cycle or per gigabyte of transfers. I think they'll start to compete on who has the best models, who has the best pre-trained models. So I think that will open it up more. And there will always be these economies of scale, and we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of this winner-take-all. I think most of the winner-take-all is not really due to AI, it's due to global communication, right? So, if I'm a tomato farmer and I'm 10% better than my competitors, then I get 10, maybe 20% more money. But if I'm an app maker and my app is 10% better than everybody else, then I get 90% of the audience, and it's a global audience, not just the audience within a few miles. and that's been true for a number of years. I don't think AI necessarily accelerates that. I think it's the global communication access to global market that makes that happen.
Any comments? Anyone strongly agree, strongly disagree?
If making apps is a good example here, if that's something that AI is going to do, then being able to spend better than whatever software stack you've got, spending 24/7, whatever. Can't they make that 10% better many of the time?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And you hear all these analogies, and I forget who it was that said AI is the new oil. It was maybe Kai-Fu Lee or somebody like that. Or data is new oil. Yeah.
Economist.
Yeah, the Economist or something. I think that's wrong, because the great thing about oil is that it's fungible. And, I don't care if my oil came from Alaska or Saudi Arabia or whatever. I can use it with the same thing. But for data, that's not true at all, right? If I'm building a language model and I want to build a model in English and my data is in Chinese, that's not going to help me, right? So I think data is more compartmentalized. And so you will see that sort of localization, globalization.
And,
Yeah, so compute is more like oil. Yeah, that's right.
nice analogy. All right, great. Well, so another question, I guess, that I had, you had to have this one talk on, I think one of the hardest things that you had to learn was, letting your AI learn and learning to let go of how your AI learns. On the other hand, you also wrote this article on, how, teaching yourself how to program could take as much as 10 years. So, I guess there's this, not really a distinction to be made, but like how do you see that, that trajectory panning out? Like, do you think eventually we will have to just let go and they'll become more ununderstandable and incomprehensible to us and much more independent? Or do you think that there is something to be said for actually trying to, create really intelligible models to us? And where do you see that trajectory going?
Yeah, so I wrote this essay, in response to all these books that said, teach yourself programming in 24 hours or whatever. And my response was, you can learn something in 24 hours or 30 days or whatever they promise, but you're not going to be a professional at that point. And I think maybe it's a lacking of the software engineering profession that we aren't certified. I mean, it's good that we have this freedom to do what we want. But, if you want to be a civil engineer, there's a long process you go to prove that you're not going to make a bridge that falls down. And it takes many, many years to get to that level. And I think the same thing is true if you want to reach a certain level of achievement in software engineering. So that's what I was trying to say. On the other hand, if you just want to solve one particular task, then there's lots of things you can do in just a few hours. And I have nothing against that, right? And if that's the level you want to be at, then sure, go ahead and do that.
And in terms of the system, the AI systems that you interact with, do you feel like they are becoming more and more distinct to any type of intelligence that you could, much or at least easily comprehend? Like, do you think that they're sufficiently becoming different? Because one thing that we mentioned in the book, at least, is that over the long run, we are very likely going to create cognitive architectures that are significantly different to our human ones in a way that they may actually become incomprehensible to us. Do you think that's something that's likely from your vantage point?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I talked this morning about computing becoming more of a natural science where you make observations and you're never able to actually get to the ground truth. You just make these theories. And even though there is an underlying mathematics that is absolute, you can't get at that because it's too complex. But I think we shouldn't be too surprised at that because we're already at that with respect to trying to understand each other, right? So we never really understand how another person is thinking. We never really understand how ourselves are thinking, right? We have a model of ourselves, but that's just the model. It's not, we don't really understand what's going on. So we should learn to live with that.
I guess we had Gillian Hatfield the other day, and she mentioned that I think Impartial Observer from Adam Smith, and that the way that we react to each other over time is also formed by the reactions that other people have to us and our reactions back to them. And so I'm guessing that because we can at least model our other human agents, at least somewhat still, that there's still maybe a little bit more of a bridge to be built, but that may be much harder if we're interacting with agents that, are really good at tricking us or using all kinds
Right. But, you would have all these bugs.
Yeah.
And, you ask someone how much they're willing to spend for this bottle of wine, and that number will change by 30% based on, first you ask them to write down the last 2 digits of your social security. And if they write down, that happens to be 90, then they say, oh yeah, I'd be willing to pay $7 for this bottle of wine. If it happens to be 20, then they say, oh no, I'd only be able to spend $30 for this bottle of wine. Right, so something that should be completely related. It's a number. People can't help take that number into account. And so dozens of other bugs that humans have. And there's nothing we can do about it.
Any reactions to this? Agreements, disagreements? Yeah, go for it.
So, taking this into account, and also taking into account some of the things.
Maybe speak up a little if you can.
One of the things that came up this morning is the danger of centralized media companies having an incentive to make use of these bugs of humans and essentially lead humans into making decisions that are not in their interest, but in the interest. So basically, you've got this undefended raw human, and then you've got this increasing AI that's trying to learn how to manipulate them. Where I want the counter vision that I find attractive, and but I haven't thought about is the notion of an epistemic assistant. To have that the agent, that the thing that you are as an agent in the world that is able to defend itself epistemically while engaging with the world, you have your own AI that's helping you weigh evidence and engage with other agents that are trying to sneak you.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I look at these assistants that we have today, which are very primitive to Siri and Alexa and Google and so on. But I think it's really interesting because they represent a sort of phase change in operating systems. So we only had a few of those, right? We went from mainframes to PCs to mobile, and now there's this other candidate. And and I find it kind of crazy. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, hey, I've got a great idea. Let's throw away the keyboard and the mouse and the screen, and all you have is a speaker. Won't that be great? I would have said, well, you're nuts. Why would I want to throw those things away? So you could tell why I'm in research and not in marketing. Right? Because I had no idea that was going to be popular. So that's popular. But the other thing about it that I think is really interesting is right now, when I want something to happen, I want a pizza to show up or a car to show up to take me somewhere. I press one of these icons on here, and now Domino's or Uber has complete control over my phone. Right? I've given it 100% of the screen and everything else, and their programmers are in charge of the interface and manipulating me in whatever way they want. But with the assistants, it may not be that way. It may be that I say, hey, I want a pizza. And now the assistant is more on my side rather than Domino's being on Domino's side, and I have a chance. So I think that's really interesting, and we'll see how it all plays out.
Sharon? Sharon?
Hi, a question or maybe like a comment on where you mentioned, well, you can't learn, software engineering in 24 hours to be like that useful. And also I'd like the commentary on how AI is kind of like this natural science, because we very much interact. We like do all this we do all this tuning and hyperparameter tuning especially, but now I think we've evolved, or there's this growth of prompt tuning that's kind of interesting. Prompt tuning. So instead of doing hyperparameter tuning as someone who understands what's going on with the system, I think humans who have maybe less education or less like technical skills in terms of software can do prompt tuning and start to interact with the AI that way. Oh, when I said this, GPT-3 said that, and so maybe I should modify this slightly. And I think Google as a search engine is very much prompt tuning, right? Like we prompt to get the search results that we want. And so I'm just curious what your thoughts are on the growth of that interface.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And we're certainly facing that at Google, that we spent many years where we taught people to, just give us the keywords, right? Don't speak English to us. Don't say, please, Google, could you tell me blah, blah, blah. And so we trained them to do that. But now we can do more, right? Now we actually could have a conversation, and people are still typing in 3 keywords. So now we got to say, never mind what we trained you to do over the last couple of years. Now we're going to work completely differently, and that's tough. And I said we had this paradigm of Windows and mice, so it was a web paradigm. And the great thing about it was discoverable, right? I could go up, and at the top of the screen, there's 5 categories of commands, and I could click on each one. And I could see, okay, now I kind of get the feeling for what all the commands are. And some of them I got to kind of explore, and I don't quite know what's where, and maybe it's hard to figure out where something is. But it's all sort of theoretically understandable. But if you just got a speaker sitting in front of you, you have no idea what you can do, right? And I can ask for the weather, and I can ask for my calendar, and I can ask for directions and so on, and maybe 10 other things. And after that, I'm kind of stuck. I don't know what else is going to work and what's not going to work. And two requests that seem very similar to me, one of them works perfectly and the other one doesn't work at all. And so either we've got to get to the point where the AI is so good that it's just like a person and you can ask it everything, or the human factors people have got to do a much better job of explaining, here's what you can ask and here's what's not going to work.
Maybe taking that notion of the kind of like personal epistemic assistant and combining it with what we talked about today, which was a little bit the notion, I think he was suggesting in one of the Lex Friedman podcasts, but also I think, just in general, that people are much more interested in like, when you say of a rational, intelligent agent at maximizing expected utility, people back in the days were very interested in like, what does maximizing mean, what does expected mean? And now more and more people are interested in what does this utility mean? Yeah. And so I guess, we at least in the book take a more skeptical approach to the fact that there is something like, maybe even a public utility that can be aggregated across humans that then an AI could be aligned with. And we basically say, look, this is really difficult already for humans to just know what's up in each other's heads, then let alone aggregate this, and then let alone teach this very human notion of what we care about to AIs that have a very different cognitive architecture and grew up in under different evolutionary constraints and so forth. So I'm just, I would just be curious to see, because you mentioned that maybe that relies on a more crude notion of utility that doesn't take into account externalities. So I'd be curious to know, like, how, hopeful are you that we can figure out something like, an aggregate utility for humanity and teach it to an AI that has a very different cognitive architecture? Or aren't we better off with just doing what we already do as a civilization? We don't expect everyone to kind of like, reach value consensus on everything, but instead we put a framework in place that allows different, values or different utility maximizers to kind of voluntarily cooperate in a way that has little vulnerabilities, but much space for cooperation.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to agree. One of the things
the two of us, or
everybody else. Everybody else.
It's a good case in point.
Two of us might agree. Right. We're probably a lot closer than the rest of the broad world. One of the things I'm really interested in is the epistemic status of gamma. Right. So in reinforcement learning, you raise to a power what's going on in the future, and you sort of discount what's going on in the future. And you do that for a number of reasons. Right. So one reason is it's the same reason your bank does it, is that having money now is more valuable than having money in the future. Another reason you do it is so that there won't be infinities, and so that you can actually reason. And another reason you do it is you're less certain about the future, so you don't want that to count too much because it might be a mistake. And we try to squish all 3 of those things into one little number. And then nobody has any idea what the right number is. So you just, empirically try different numbers and you say, well, for this application, this value would work best. And that doesn't seem right? It seems like we should have a better idea of how much the counts. And, I hear some of these singularitarians saying, well, in the future, we're going to be in millions of planets and there's going to be
Who are they?
trillions of people. And, so everything we should count about the future. And, today should hardly count at all. And my reaction to that is, well, yeah, I really care about my kids. I got 2 kids. And, if they ever have grandkids, I'd probably care about them. But 10 or 20 generations down the line, they might all be assholes. Why should I care about that? Right? Maybe I want them to have negative utility.
Well, lest we hit escape velocity an hour round for it. Yasha, you know for it?
Expected utility.
Can you speak up? I'm sorry if we're doing the same, but
I think utility might be too short-sighted. Values of utility are instrumental to achieving certain extent the way that what it will look like. So if you just take the value systems of people, they usually contradict to intrinsically converse, not just between people. Like people want to assign the same value to every person, but want to assign more resources to the ones they love. People want to just be based on merit, but they want everybody to have the same outcome, and so on and so on. All these things do not run together, and ultimately, if you are brutally honest, many of the choices that you get are very unpleasant problems. And ultimately, you have to justify your own choices. I think there's an expected outcome. So you don't have to discuss just utilities. You have to discuss the utility with respect to the reward that you want to have. What is the goal that you want to have? What are the goals that are obtainable? And how can you have a negotiation about that? You see the way this on the agenda anyway. For instance, AI ethics is something that currently is AI politics.
Yep.
And it's not done with respect to expected outcomes. It's expected with respect to the impact on the politics of the day. You see a way to change that?
I mean, we can have that discussion, right? But I think you're right that ultimately we have to decide what is it that we really want, right? And so I've been following like this case with Compass, this recidivism scoring system in the courts. And, critics say, well, this is not fair because you look at the damage when you make a mistake and, black people are disadvantaged twice as much as white people. So that's blatantly unfair. And then the company that provided it said, no, we think we are fair because the metric we're tracking is if we give you a score of 6, that means you should be 60% likely to recommit a crime. And we do that and we're equally accurate whether you're white or black. So therefore, we're unbiased. And so it's just a question of which definition of fairness do you go by. And it turns out it's impossible to satisfy both of them at the same time, unless the base rates happen to be exactly equal. So then we have to decide, what does fairness mean? Everybody says fairness is a good thing, but nobody decided exactly what it means and how much each of those you want to put together. That's what, as a society, we have to come up with.
Okay, maybe we take one over there and then.
Hi, it's Lawrence Ion. I was wondering why are you not assigning probability to you living to see those million of planets, right? I mean, I'm in the longevity field. I would give you maybe not 99%, but a pretty high probability that you would make it to a longevity escape velocity and you would enjoy that future that is not going to be for your 20 generations down.
I sort of felt like I was too late, and maybe another generation.
They're still bionic.
But I'm glad you're optimistic.
No, you gotta take that in your vision.
Okay, so if it works, I'll be happy.
Okay, one more from Peter and then one last question.
For the very long-term future, how we prioritize that is in some kind of grand future. And in the short term, things like recidivism prediction. One of the answers to be confronted with really incompatible goals is that we should be structurally uncertain about them and try to explicitly build our systems to be uncertain. In fact, on the Compass front, the partnership on AI, we were a big report about that problem, and that was probably one of the very things that people didn't really take out of having a bunch of smart people work on it. But what I'm curious about is whether you see any places where that's starting to happen in high-stakes systems design, where people are saying, oh, these goals conflict, so we have to have a user interface that surfaces that multidimensional value trade-off to lots of people all the time, so they know they're not accidentally smuggling a really dangerous choice about fairness into the machine. Said this person was high risk, and so I'm throwing them in prison.
I don't know of good examples of that. I think that's an important area, and I think we need better tools for that. Right. So we spend a lot of time devising programming languages to tell us what to do in elegant ways, and we spend very little time devising languages to tell us what we want. And I think we need to work on better tools for that.
Well, I think, one thing that even with the fairness, I guess, disagreement about like what counts as fair, like I think, one like beautiful way I think that we also discussed today in the conversation was, look, even if we don't all agree, we still as humans live in a civilization that can handle those disagreements really well. And we can still cooperate with those entities, whether they're humans, software, or whatever, with those that we want without really, inflicting much hurt on the others. And so, one, I guess, way in which we could do that across humans, we already discussed today, were institutions, right? And so the Constitution as a thing in itself was already able to place different types of institutions and different types of humans working in institutions in opposition to each other to be able for them to keep each other in check in a more, I guess, multipolar way, right? And so, we discussed it, I guess, as a brief thing. Could you imagine something similar working in the context of AIs as well? Like, I think you also shared the fact that we already are in a civilization that is a super intelligence in which we're cooperating with a variety of different intelligences. And even if we don't always agree, at least we find a way in which we cooperate with each other, we hold each other in check, maybe in a way in which, this different powers are set against each other. Is there a way to actually completely do that in artificial intelligence systems? Like, could you imagine a way in which they could be placed in such a order towards each other?
Yeah, I guess I'm pretty confident that things will be kept in check.
Yeah.
And I worry sometimes about the way we keep things in check. Right. So my sort of first sort of brush with political issues was in the 1980s when I was a member of Computer Professionals for Social Responsibility, which mostly said, well, we shouldn't blow up the world with nuclear weapons. We should try to teach policymakers that these software systems are not completely reliable, and we shouldn't rely on them, and we should have more safeguards against blowing each other up. And so far that worked, whether because we were prescient or because we were just lucky, but we're still here. But we still face a lot of risks. And, these people who are worried about a hard AI takeoff, I think the main thing they're worried about is one entity having an advantage so that the checks no longer matter.
Yeah.
Right? So if it's a slow takeoff, then everybody's competing with each other, and the checks sort of work the same way they've been working all along. If somebody suddenly gets a 10x or 100x advantage over everybody else, then they could ignore all the checks and impose their own will. And that's what people are worried about.
I mean, like, who was here for Danny Ellsberg's Zoom conversation? Who joined that one on nuclear risk? That was pretty terrifying. Went on for 3 hours, and I think we're definitely not we're definitely not through there. I don't want to put you on the spot, Andrew, but you wrote a lot, like really eloquently on prepotence. Sorry, and that also tackling more risk scenarios and how they may play into that entire field. So I'm wondering, maybe if you have a few suggestions, because they at least broadly relate to the threat of, like, what if the actors developing more advanced intelligences can't hold each other in check? What happens in a race that goes out of hand? I don't know if you want to speak to it. Don't want to put you on the spot. Fine if you don't, but.
Sure, yeah, I guess the main reason I introduced the concept of prepotence for AI technology is because I think the risks are not only posed by centralized agency, and I'm glad we're all alert to the centralized agency risk, and I hope that alertness will result in checks and balances appropriate to that type of technology emerging, in case it does. But I think we can also have distributed technological changes that get out of hand and can't be stopped. Like, it's not easy to shut down the electrical grid, and I think we could do it if everyone woke up tomorrow and decided we want to turn off the electrical grid. I think we could actually do it. Many people would die, but we could in fact go through the action of turning it off if we human
humans collectively, even if we all agreed, would not have the ability to turn off the technology that we've built to sustain and manage the planet and each other. And I use the word prepotent to refer to a state in which AI technology is unstoppably transformative. There's a transformation that's coming, and we no longer collectively have the ability to stop it. And some people think we're already there. I don't know if we are, but I'm interested in safeguarding not only against centralized risks, but any kind of systemic introduction of an unstoppable source of change to the planet. And the reason I care about that is because any vector of change, if applied to the Earth for a while, almost certainly kills all humans, because almost every variable, like you just pick some variable like the Earth, like concentration of carbon atoms, or how much oxygen is available, or what's the temperature, the air pressure. Just pick a vector, change the planet along that vector for a while, all humans are dead. So I think we should be very careful to introduce any source of permanent, sustainable change that's unstoppable by us, and that's what we're.
Well, I just today earlier talked with Mark about the fact that we may have already done so. Do you want to elaborate?
Sure. So there's this. There's often this framing about how right now humans are in control, all computers are just things that we create and we run, and a world in which software are not just cognition, but independent of us, something that is essentially something that is not under the control of any particular humans in a realistic way. DAOs, the programs that run under blockchain, starting with Bitcoin, these are the thing that's interesting about today's world is we see that humans have accidentally created an incentive structure where it's in the interest of humans to create systems for running programs that run according to the program's construction, but are then, once started, incorruptible by humans. The incorruptibility is essential because these things become coordination points due to their credibility that humans can't corrupt them. And therefore, they're essentially operating as autonomous, independent creatures in the world that coexist with us but are not under our control.
I think, at least in the chapter, like a few of them can already, I think, have rights by just the virtue of the fact that you can incorporate an entity in Zug, and then you can turn it into a DAO, and then even, especially if you transact with it privately, you may not even know whether you are interacting with an artificial agent or a human already in today's world. Okay, maybe one more, and then...
I just wanted to bring up that the risk might not only be things that even every human is free from. Historically, there's so many times where a very small minority is able to sort of take control over a large majority. And I'd also be worried about systems, let alone if 90% of people don't like them, it's still impossible to turn off. Say everyone agrees that something is bad, that over-optimizing ads bad, and yet no company that's controlled by shareholders can stop doing it without everyone else doing it. So it might be something that the risk is even closer, even without something that's fully autonomous. There could be societal structures where, because of the common goods problem, no one can stop.
Having mentioned that the reason why these things are withdrawn from human control is actually something that in these cases we should welcome, and we should realize that there is a premise here of creating arrangements that humans can't corrupt, that have an integrity and will once they're started. And that's interesting. You can see that as in a very positive.
So if I was,
Final word.
if I was an alien and you asked me to report on planet Earth,
If only.
if you give me 2 words, I'd say mostly harmless. And if I got more than 2 words, I'd say, the main species on Earth is the automobile, and they enslaved these creatures called humans to drive them around. And they get most of the cities is devoted to the automobiles, and the humans are slaves to them, and there's not much the humans can do about it. So that's the situation we're in. And now we're going to see, are the computers going to take over from the automobile?
Well, judging from your shirt, it's happening in space too. Even one for the dogs. All right. So maybe just to wrap it up from the first one, then we do like a 15-minute break, and then we'll get into the agoric approach to computing. What do you think people, who are now getting into the industry really should have their eyes on that they may not be aware of? If, they're trying to make the future go well, as we all do in our own particular ways, what's a good thing that they can do right tomorrow?
Wow. I think the answer is different for everybody, right? So there's so much to be done. Some of it is technical, some of it is political, some of it is sociological. So just find a place to contribute.
Plug in, cooperate. Okay, well, that was the first part of the after show gathering to Peter's virtual talk today. And after, let's say, 15-minute break, get some refreshments in, get a drink if you'd like. We'll talk about the agoric approach to computing, which I think fits in really nicely and fills us up really nicely to where we just left off. Again, I can't tell you, thank you so much for joining, not virtually today, but also for this. It was really, really fun.
Right.
And yeah, grab some refreshments. I'm sure that there's lots to talk about. I always see people's faces when I'm here, just expressing so many emotions. So I'm hoping that we get a chance to share them all. And I wish there was a way in which we could also bilingually communicate all the things that are left unsaid, even with this very tiny fireside chat. And for the next round in 50 minutes, maybe we move closer together. Okay? All right. See you in 50 minutes.